start.
No, I want
Are you the
to.
mom?
Hi, welcome. Thank you all for coming to our first town hall meeting of the season. My name is Paige Touse. I'm CEO of POPP, the Protection of Paige People. We're a non-for-profit organization that focuses on protecting, informing, and developing all the residents of Paige. Today is a night for anybody in the Paige community to stand up and ask any questions that they have concerning what's going on in the community. A lot has been happening through our public forum, press conferences, and media interviews that have gone out, as well as what's been going on with Twitter and Instagram. So the floor is open right now to anybody of the community if they would like to raise their hand and ask a question. Yes,
Should I stand up?
whatever you would like.
How do I deal with the water? What's going on with that?
So as of last week, a press release was sent out to the Paige government talking about our water and that there's high levels of turpentine and endovirus in the water. So turpentine is the cloudiness of water. Sometimes that can be seen during the summer seasons of pools and stuff, but now it's happening to our water supply. Endovirus is a group of viruses that can infect the lining of your eyes, the airways in your lungs, intestines, urinary tract, and nervous system. These viruses can cause fevers, coughs, sore throats, diarrhea, pink eye. The symptoms will go away within a few days, but if you do have a weaker immune system or you are a child, we ask that you just be very careful about that and monitor it. We also ask that you do not give aspirin to children because that can lead to a serious condition called Rye syndrome. The mayor released an infographic telling what the public can do for this water supply. So they suggest drinking liquids, so drink clean water, bottled water if best, not from Paige at the moment as we're trying to fix the water supply, as well as fruit juices and drinks with electrolytes, Gatorades, such like that. Clean your sinuses with saline solution to help clear out your system, as well as using a humidifier. The mayor's office is setting up open clinics for the public to go and get served, and they're doing their best as of now to fix the water supply issue. Any other questions you have? Yes.
In an interview, you talked about tenants' rights. What are those?
So tenant rights, that goes into there's many tenant rights. So tenants that we're talking about is people who rent an apartment or rent from a landlord. So tenant rights can be as simple as your privacy, being the right to a livable home, as well as the right to use your security deposits and non-discriminatory treatment from landlords. Most of these rights are self-explanatory and don't usually get written into leases. Another right you have is the right to not pay your rent if a landlord has not done required work. So say that your heater's not working in your apartment and they've yet to do anything to fix it, you have the right to not pay your rent until that landlord does that. As well as with tenant rights, there's rent control, which rent control is pretty much limiting the amount of rent a landlord can charge. In New York State, they have the Emergency Tenants Protection Act of 1974, which establishes county guidelines. This again prevents landlords from terminating month-to-month leases, as well as deciding not to renew a lease. This controls rent stability. Not all rental homes have this protection or have rent control. Paige is protected under this law, but they do not have rent control at the moment, which is something that we hope to talk to the mayor's office and the government about fixing, especially with the stuff that might be happening with the Olympics that could cause rent to go up or down depending on the development of that and what new companies might come in. We will also provide more information from that. There's a website called nolo.com that will give you more information about that as well. Any other questions?
Does any of that correlate to homeowners' rights?
Homeowners' rights are a little more simple. So one of the basic rules of homeowner rights is you can't break the law. If you can't do it outside your home, you can't do it inside your home. You got to follow that rule. Other things with homeowner rights would be zoning ordinance. So if you wanted to build a gazebo in your backyard or something, you have to check about zoning ordinances to see if you are able to do that. Also, some neighborhoods have homeowners, homeowner groups, so that might also dictate certain stuff like what you are able to do or not to do. Some cases you can't leave your garbage cans out in your driveway, you have to put them in your garage. And that in itself can also affect property interest, which then affects your homeowner rights. Any other questions?
I would like to backtrack to what you talking about the Olympics. It sounds great, but why wouldn't we want it to come to Paige?
So the Olympics is a great event to do, but it's not a great event for Paige itself. A lot of problems have happened in other countries, including Rio, South Korea, which is going to be having their Olympics this year, but for the winter, as well as London has faced other issues. One of the major issues that has happened is that how much money it costs to build and host the Olympics does not equate to how much we get back from it. So for the Winter Olympics in South Korea, like I was talking about, they have already spent $13 billion in preparation for the games, and the upkeep for the structures that they have built will continue to cost money for decades to come. Even if they brought in $5 billion, it will still fall short of covering the cost of what it took to build it. Also in Montreal, the 1976 games, that games didn't get paid off until 2006. It took them about 30 years to pay off how much they had done to build the actual thing. And then cases in Rio, there were stadiums that were built and housing complexes that were built that just got left behind after the games were done. So all that money that was put into building these things, you never got any revenue back afterwards because they were just abandoned. As well as having how much it costs, there's gentrification and rezoning that happens. So this means that families will be taken from their homes. In the north part of Rio, for their games for 2016, there was around 385 families that were forced to leave in order to make a high-speed bus lane in between the airport and where most of the games were held. Sometimes due to legal matters, some of these families took years to see compensation happen to them. In one case, there was an article written in 2015 where families still had not been able to receive their money, and the games were going to happen in just a year. Also with that, over 22,000 families were starting to be displaced 7 years before the games had even happened. So they were moving families out 7 years in advance. And because of this, a lot of people lost jobs, lost contact with their family and their friends, and had to remove their entire life.
But Paige Touse 2022 said that they would compensate.
And they did say that they will compensate, but when you look at what they're compensating, how much of that can they actually promise? So going in regards to the housing units that were created for Rio, like I said before, sometimes get abandoned. One case, there was 384 units in this housing complex, and the residents were obligated to work from their homes despite being told that they weren't able to use that spaces in the apartments as workplaces. So they had to break rules in order to actually do things that they needed to do. Residents also had to pay for more utilities than they were paying for beforehand. They also had a lack of local schools because of where these homes had been built, as well as a lack of health facilities and other basic infrastructure problems that are common with buildings that are built like this. As well as their promise for tickets. A ticket for the 2012 Winter Olympic Games for the opening ceremony cost $3,000. How can they promise that to all of the families that have been displaced for this? I know the IOC is trying to limit how much money that they're giving back for compensation, so how can they provide for that? Also, when Paige Touse 2020 talks about how great this opportunity is for the community, they talk about giving jobs to people. In Rio, only 25% of the jobs went to local people who work there. Is there any more questions? Is there any questions from the media?
Give me a second.
Okay, sorry. Anybody else have questions?
Go to me right now, sorry.
No?
So are you supporting CHO-FC's mission to also try and get the Olympics to Paige Touse 2020? Have you worked with CHO-FC at all? Or no?
We haven't worked with CHO-FC, but we did attend their press conference, and during their press conference they had made it clear that they're not working with the Olympics despite wanting to create an 18,000 seat stadium. They did talk about doing that in the northern part of Paige Touse, which again will remove families from their homes. They also made it very abundantly clear that during their press conference they didn't care if they had to take homes from the people. They said that if property needed to be taken, it needed to be taken, and that wasn't going to be their problem. And that's where POPP really hopes to step in. If we're going to work with them, we want to work with them on finding spaces that aren't going to uproot families. We want the families to be here and where they live, because CHO-FC can offer many opportunities for kids. They could open soccer clinics, they are positive role models for the females in this community, but we don't want their goals to interfere with the current living status of many of the families in Paige Touse. If that is all for the questions. We can end this session, and we will be releasing another date for the town hall meeting for later in November.